A note to listeners. This is the second of a two-part episode featuring Paul E. White. I highly recommend that you start with the previous episode. You'll be glad you did. And now,
Soft
power.
Powerful.
Soft
Powerful.
Powerful stories.
Powerful
Soft
Powerful. Stories.
There was one time in a helicopter we were flying, and the helicopter came under ground fire. And the guy who was sitting next to me, who was a Hmong military guy, there was these popping sounds, pop, pop, and a bullet hit the guy next to me in the chest, and blood squirted out like a fountain. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place. And I thank God when I got off of that helicopter, the guy was killed.
the U.S. secret war in Laos lasted from 1961 to 1975. It was a covert CIA-led campaign during the Vietnam War, in which America armed Hmong fighters and carried out one of the heaviest bombing campaigns in history to block communist expansion and disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
I was fairly new in Laos when I went there, and I was told by the commander of the Special Warfare School, he said, "We don't want you to mention the CIA or any military stuff." It was top secret, everything that was going on. No one could travel to Sam Tong without the ambassador's written approval. And so if aid auditors came to do something, there was no way they could ever come to where we were, or anyone. Only a few people could come to that area. So I had been doing foreign aid development work, development assistance, education in the school. But now I was up working with refugees, doing another spigot of foreign aid, humanitarian aid, for refugees, providing rice and cooking oil and cooking pots and pans for refugees and temporary shelter and medicines and things like that, and even agricultural tools to get them back into some kind of production and insecticide and pesticide. So I was doing another kind of aid work, humanitarian aid for refugees. The Hmong army was mostly Hmong, but there were also other ethnic minorities that worked with the Hmong. One was called the Lao Tung. The Hmong were called the Lao Sung, which meant, Sung means the top of a mountain, because that's where the Hmong lived. The Lao Tung were maybe the indigenous people of Laos. They didn't speak a Chinese language like the Lao do. They spoke non-tonal language, and they were very dark-skinned. Their story was that when God created the world, he created it out of a huge fire. And as people popped out, lighter-skinned people got out first. And the Lao Tung were among the last to get out. They had never seen an African. So they had dark skin. So Pop said, now that you're here at the airstrip, I want you to work with the Lao Tung. Your complexion is like theirs. You'll maybe have a better fit with them than some of my other officers. The commander of the Lao Tung was named Siang Man Noi. So I began to work with Siang Man Noi in his Lao Tung villages rather than Hmong. The villages that we worked in were spread around the Plain of Jars. The North Vietnamese headquarters was in the Plain of Jars in Laos. So the North Vietnamese were basically protecting the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And from the Plain of Jars, they were trying to take over Laos, one village at a time. So most of the refugee villages we worked with were either to the north of the Plain of Jars or to the south or the west. There were none to the east. That was all totally communist. What we basically would do is if there was active fighting and the civilian population was in danger, we would move them. So during that fighting, we were going in with helicopters and stuffing people into airplanes to move them to a safer location. Once we moved them, then we had to have them start life over. 10 sheets to build some kind of temporary housing until they could get bamboo or build their own house. Food, cooking oil, pots and pans, because they had usually left with almost nothing. Medicine. So the nature of our program was to do those kind of basic human needs programs, but also to identify young people in the village who could be trained in Samtong as medics or as school teachers or as nurses, and to provide, as soon as we could, agriculturally implements and rice seeds to get them starting on a new life. The problem with that is that we would resettle people and they would have a year during the rainy season to get started again. And often the North Vietnamese would come in and hit them again and they would move again. So after 2 or 3 times of trying to start their life anew, people kind of lost the enthusiasm. But that was our job. Working with the Lao Tung people, I learned maybe my best lesson of all in Southeast Asia. It didn't come from the special warfare school, the camouflage guys, or the State Department people who knew diplomacy. It came from Sieng Man Noi, who was a Lao Tung commander who maybe had been trained for some time in Thailand by the CIA, but he certainly had not traveled beyond that. As far as I know, he was not even literate. I'm not sure of that. As I worked those villages, a helicopter would usually fly me into the village, drop me off, leave me for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then come and pick me up. And in that time, I would do an assessment of a list of people and who needed support, who didn't need support, how much rice do we need, how much cooking oil do we need per week, all of that stuff during the day. But at night, there was nothing to do. There's no electricity. So you would sit around the village headman's house, around their cooking fire. They're an oral tradition culture. So I would hear stories and I would ask a lot of questions. How do you as Lao Tung relate to the Hmong? And how do the Hmong relate to the Lao and to the Vietnamese? Those kind of questions. Or what's your origin story? How did you come about it? What are your traditions and your culture? I started feeling like Ruth Benedict or Margaret Mead. I had access to these rituals that I'm sure very few Westerners have ever seen. The calling back of the dead ceremony, things like that. But one day, Sieng Man Noi said to me, Paul, do you know that you have counterparts? Because all of his villages were in contested areas. Some of them were leaning on the North Vietnamese side and others leaning on our side. I worked on the ones that were nominally on our side. He said, on the other villages, they have people just like you, but they're different. They don't bring rice and school supplies and medicine. They take our rice and they take the animals and they abuse our women and they recruit men to walk down the Ho Chi Minh Trail with carrying ammunition. But, he said, they do something that's really different than you. At night, around the fire, where you're asking stories about our past, they don't talk about the past. They talk about the future. They talk about a bright new world when all of the foreign devils are driven into the sea. And Laos is there only for the Lao people and the Lao Tung and the Hmong. They talk about that bright time when they will have the Lao, and you will have the helicopters and the rice, and you won't have to depend on anyone else. He was telling me something. I, as an IVS volunteer, was there not for the war. I had nothing to do with the military. I was there because I was helping people with basic human needs. I was doing good for goodness sake, not for the war, not for anything. I was helping people who needed help. But he was telling me that in the eyes of those villagers, humanitarian aid and military aid are two sides of the same coin. And in fact, the refugees that we were working with were in fact military dependents. And our support for them as military dependents allowed the men to fight on the battlefield because their families were being taken care of. It was far more complex than I had ever thought it was. I was just there to do good, but he opened my eyes. He opened my eyes to the fact that while I was giving things, satisfying today's needs, the Vietnamese weren't giving anything, but they were tapping into the hope that there's going to be a better future at some time. I wasn't doing that at all. That really was a lesson for me. At that time, IVS was in turmoil. The IVSers mostly worked in forward areas, out towards contested areas as well. And they were funded by USAID, as I was, doing basic human needs, good things. But they could see both sides of that coin, and they weren't comfortable continuing to receive USAID funding to be involved in one way or another as part of the war effort. An IVSer was killed in one of the forward areas by Vietnamese, and that became the rallying cry for IVS to say, we don't want to do this anymore. And they cut their funding relationship with USAID, and without that funding, most people had to leave. There was just no opportunity. So a message came to Pop saying, you've got an IVSer there. They're all being pulled out of forward areas, and Sam Tom is a forward area. So Pop called me in and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I love doing what I'm doing now. And he said, if you want, you can call IVS and tell them that you resign, and I will put you on contract the next minute to work with USAID. That was it. I was an aid contractor. There was no negotiation, no talk about vacation time or salary or anything. I was an aid person. The paperwork will follow. And later I was able to parlay that into a USAID direct hire.
And a decades-long career.
In a 40-year career with USAID.
Tell me about the Air America pilot. What's that story?
His name was Sip. Sip was one of the few people I've met in my life who I really felt was a true racist, who had a prejudice that cut deeply. When I walked into the Air America lounge, we called it, it was just a little snack bar where the pilots rested at night and ate. If Sip was in the room and I walked in, he would walk out. After several times of that, I asked someone, what is it with Sip? And they said, well, Sip is his name. He's from Mississippi. And he's a Southern gentleman of the worst kind. He has the reddest neck that you'll ever have, and he doesn't tolerate your kind. So that was Sip. But something happened. During January 1968, dry season, that's when the Vietnamese attack a lot. But there was coordinated attacks all over Military Region 2. That's what Northeast Laos was called. Even worse, in Vietnam, the Tet Offensive started. There were more than 100 bases attacked simultaneously by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. And at that particular time, every airplane that was in Laos was diverted, the Air America Continental planes, to Vietnam to take care of that real mess there. We were also having attacks in Laos, but Laos wasn't the priority. Vietnam was. So on that particular day, I was the only operations officer. Everybody else was already out dealing with the attacks that were happening everywhere. And there were no airplanes. And one of the key sites that we worked with is called Lima Site 50, Pukum. It was a 4,200-foot karst, a mountain. But from the top of Pukum, you could look into the plain of jars and see Pon Savam, which was the North Vietnamese headquarters. You could see the karst and the caves where they kept all of their weapons. So Pukum was sitting there in such a strategic place. If it were to fall, it would mean almost the beginning of the end of the war. Pukum had gone silent the night before. And in war, when something goes silent, it can often mean something very bad has happened. So Pop called me in and he said, we really have to find out what's happening at Pukum. All the CIA guys are out doing other things. You're the only operations officer here, and there are no airplanes. But there was one plane that was being repaired, and it's repaired now. And before it goes to Vietnam, they're sending it here for me to send you to Pukum to find out what's happening. It might be just a radio problem. So I want you to take a single sideband radio with you. But there's one thing I have to tell you. Pilot that's coming, Sip. And he knows that you're the customer. and he's accepted that. But I need you to say you accept it as well. I said, I don't have a problem with SIP. He has a problem. So if he's accepted it, there's no problem. So SIP arrived. I climbed into the cockpit next to him. Silence. We took off. It's about maybe 45 minutes to Pukum. There were no words exchanged. The weather was terrible. Low-hanging clouds. You could not see the ground. The world was gray. But when we got around Pukum, all of a sudden there was an opening. And we could look down and we could see the airstrip at Pukum. The way that we worked is we had secret signals with people on the ground. The aircraft would circle 1 time or 2 times or 3 times, and at the right time, people would put out a signal on the ground with white parachute cloth. In Pukum, it was a W. So I said, SIP, circle twice. He circled twice. People on the ground came out and they put the W. So that could mean that they're okay, but it also could mean that the signal was compromised. So then I had him circle 1 more time, and I saw a little bit of movement at the school, a little bit of movement at the marketplace. And I said, SIP, I think we need to put it down. And for the first time, he said, yes, sir. First words he had ever said to me, because I was the customer, and he was also there in service of the United States. Yes, sir, he said. Now, Pukum was maybe the most dangerous of all of the airstrips in Laos. The strip started at the karst, and it did an S-turn uphill, and it ended in another karst. So if you came in too low, you crashed into the karst. If you came in too far, you couldn't brake before you hit the other karst. But all of those pilots were really tremendous. So SIP comes in, we land, we're taxiing up the hill. We hear the whistle of a Katyusha rocket. Right over the top of the plane. And it exploded maybe 100 yards away. So SIP said, I've got to get out of here. I'll drop you if you want, or I can take you. I said, no, I need to get out. So he dropped me off. I met Jiopao as I watched the plane take off. Jiopao, I said, what's going on? Jiopao had Lao, but it was really broken, accented Lao, and he spoke with military efficiency. He said, enemy at bottom of hill. We fight 2 days. We think we have them contained, but problem, no radio. Radio broke. So I said, Jiopao, tell me what you need. He said, I need rice. I need POL, oil for the generator. I need medicine, and I have 5 people killed and 5 seriously wounded. I need to medevac the wounded. I communicated that by ground-air radio to SIP, and SIP relayed it back to Pop. SIP called me back a few minutes later to say, orders in, stuff will be ready for my next trip up here. And as we were talking, the weather started to sock in. The clouds covered the airstrip. So I said, SIP, the locals tell me that it's going to be 2 or 3 hours before this cloud cover lifts. You're not going to be able to get in. Why don't you go back to Samtong, get the POL, get the rice, get it, the medicine, and come back and pick me up? SIP said, can't do that. So my orders are from Pop. I just talked to him. He said, don't leave my guy up there. You need to get in and get him out. So SIP said, there's one thing that I can do. I can't see the airstrip, but I can see the top of the karst at the end of the airstrip. He said, I'm going to fly over the airstrip. I want you to stand in the middle of the airstrip, and if you can see me, and if you can't see me, if you can hear me, you need to tell me if I'm aligned correctly to land. I couldn't see except just a glint, and it was clear that he was pretty well aligned with the airstrip. So I said, SIP, you are aligned with the airstrip. So he's taking his life in his own hands by coming into that strip with instruments without being able to see. He landed, taxied up the hill. He had told me, get the wounded up to the top of the hill. We're sitting ducks for those rocket attacks. So he taxied up to the top of the hill. We got the wounded in. I got in. We took off. You go down the S, and at the other end at the karst, you haven't gotten enough airspeed to lift yet. So what happens is the plane just falls off the karst and the plane has huge wings, and the wind catches the wings, and the plane either lifts, or if it doesn't, you crash down into the river valley. So when the plane lifted, we both breathed. And Sip looked at me with just a thin smile, and we high-fived. We went back to Samtong, no more words. That was the only thing. We high-fived. We landed at Samtong. The wounded were carried to the hospital. Pop was coming to meet us. I looked at Sip, and he looked at me, and I saw in his eyes that there had been at least a break in that inherited hatred that he had, because we had, through courage and service, understood each other. Pop arrived. I nodded at Sip, and he nodded at me. Pop congratulated us both. He had heard from Juopao. The sideband was working. They were holding off the Vietnamese. And to make a long story short, they drove the North Vietnamese back to the Plain of Jars with all of our military support. Those Hmong were such valiant fighters. They lost so many thousands and thousands and thousands of men protecting their homeland and protecting the traditions of the Hmong in that area, but also they were contributing to the biggest U.S. policy objective in Laos, and that was to keep Laos as a buffer state between communist North Vietnam and Thailand, between communism and democracy. They were contributing in a way that we should really appreciate. They were our allies at a time when we really needed allies, and they did so much to further U.S. objectives in Vietnam in a war that they didn't choose. But again, I always like to say that they were not pawns or puppets of the United States. They were doing this just because we wanted them to do it or we were paying them. They weren't mercenaries. They were doing it because they were protecting their homeland and their traditions and their families. That's why they were doing that. They were helped by the CIA with the weapons and the training and all of that. But it wasn't like they were mercenaries who we paid to do that. And I think that's probably true of the Kurds as well. So I would like people to understand that they had their own reasons for being in the war, but they were also our allies, and they sacrificed more than anyone. The 30,000 people, I have no idea how many more were killed defending U.S. sites. People don't know that story. I don't think those kind of stories can ever be told very well. But what I would like for people to understand about the Hmong is they came as maybe the most primitive people that had ever immigrated to the United States. And if you look at them now, we have an Olympic gold medal winner who's a Hmong. We have lawyers, doctors. We have people who are contributing to our country who are Hmong. That story needs to be told. And also the story that needs to be told is we've never formally recognized those veterans in a way that we should. The other thing that as I was walking away from Pop and Sip, I thought that our foreign policy, our programs, our development aid, our humanitarian aid, and our military aid is altruistic. There's, of course, political reasons why you're doing everything, but we're also doing so much good in the world that people don't know about. The story is never told very well. I was just proud that I was an American on that American team, and that Sip and I learned something that we would never learn in any university or any church in any sermon or any DEI class or anything. And that is, when you have a cause that is larger than yourself, prejudice and hatred can dissolve so easily. If you really want development to happen, you need to start small and build. When you start small and make sure that a small success is accepted and you move to a larger success and you keep doing that, you can be successful. And the other thing is that sustainable development can't be imposed from the outside. And so what sustainable development means is that you recognize in every person there is an instinct, there's a capacity that's just waiting to be unleashed. So if you're a real development person, you tap into whatever that is inside of the people you're trying to help, and you give the sparks that light the fire. And if the fire starts burning, you stay with it, you fan it, you help it to grow. And at some point, it will keep burning on its own. If you don't do that, you're likely to fund a project that when the money stops, the project's gone. I learned a lot at that school and from seeing Manoi about how to do development work. I also had not only the development support of health, education, and agriculture, and the humanitarian assistance with refugees. I saw the side of the military assistance, even though I was not directly providing that. That was a part of the fabric of what I was doing. And I saw all three spigots of our foreign aid program up front and in Technicolor during that time in Laos. And that helped me the rest of my career, those kind of lessons that I learned.
What about the lesson you were talking about, taking care of people's immediate needs and backwards looking versus the tapping into their hopes for the future, which was what was happening in the other side? How did you incorporate that into your outlook and development work?
I think what I, after seeing Manoi's lesson, what I learned is I needed to not change what I was doing, but change the way I talked about it. That meant we were giving people rice and meeting those needs, but we were also giving them agricultural seeds and tools and helping them to start building towards another future. So I started to talk more about where they were going rather than how we were just satisfying their basic needs. In education, we were training school teachers. The future is held by school teachers. They're teaching the young. So instead of just talking about providing blackboards and chalk and school books and things like that, I started talking about where you're going as a teacher and how you're helping the village to become better prepared for whatever future comes. In health, the same thing, that we're preparing nurses to take care of not only the basic needs of people and the wounded in the war, but to take care of women who are having babies and to help them raise their children more successfully, building on what they were doing towards a better future. So I changed the way I talked about things rather than changing what I did.
Well, that means that we're coming to the end of this second episode. But I don't want to stop until I give Paul a chance to answer our dubious Aunt Deb.
Paul, I never really did understand what kept you outside of your country all these many years.
I would say something like, Aunt Deb, do you remember when I was little and I used to visit you? She would say yes. I remember a time when you stopped everything because you had a small tear in the sleeve of your blouse. You stopped everything to sew that little tear. And you told me, if I don't fix it now, it's going to get larger and larger and larger. This is my favorite blouse. Eventually, I have to throw it away. A stitch in time saves nine. Do you remember telling me that? Well, foreign aid is that stitch in nine, because foreign aid is a small investment that prevents us from having a larger investment in the future. If we don't do foreign aid, if we don't improve the lives of people, if we don't prevent small things from growing, eventually we will have bombers bombing and boots on the ground, American soldiers dead. So, first of all, I think that a stitch in time saves nine is an important message. But you may think, Aunt Deb, that foreign aid is some huge part of the American federal budget. Some people say it's 20 or 30% of the budget. That's not true. It's only 1% of the budget, less than 1%. So that kind of investment for the kind of payoff that I'm talking about is really worth it, because foreign aid certainly prevents more costly wars in the future. It also prevents diseases. It gives a healthier population will not lead to things like pandemics. People who are in a more stable country won't be fleeing as refugees or illegal immigrants to our country. Foreign aid is helping us as well as helping the people that we're helping. It's not charity. That's maybe the wrong idea that many people have. We are looking out for our own self-interest, but in doing so, we're also helping other people around the world. We're helping to build a more healthy, a more educated, a more human society, not just in our own country, but around the world. And it's certainly true that the more we do to help others, the more we benefit ourselves. So for me, a stitch in time saves nine. You taught me that, and I hope you're listening to what I'm saying, because that's why we have foreign aid. And I hope that you will be as big a supporter as I am, because I'm proud of the role that America's played in leading the world in foreign assistance. And I hope that we continue to do that well into the future.
Paul E. White served in senior roles within U.S. foreign assistance programs for nearly 4 decades across Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. He led refugee programs, multi-sector development initiatives, and high-level policy coordination. He was the senior U.S. development official at the U.S. embassies in Mexico City and Tokyo. His long career with USAID also included positions in Laos, Korea, Cambodia, Thailand, Panama, Peru, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. He served as USAID's Chief of Education and Training and Energy and Environment for Latin America, and later was the USAID Director for East Asian and South Asian Affairs. He began his overseas career in Laos with the International Voluntary Service as an English language teacher. To learn more about Paul's personal and professional journey, read Not Far from the Tree, Vignettes from Lives Well Lived. You can find more information about it at our website, softpowerfulstories.org. As always, if you haven't liked, subscribed, commented on, starred, done all of those things, now is the perfect time to do that. We would love to hear from you. You can find out more about the show, find out more about our guests, see photos, and contact us through our website, softpowerfulstories.org. Huge shout out to John Bede for suggesting that Paul's stories might be worth hearing. Talk about an understatement. Thanks also to my friend Kathy Zilski, who plays dubious Aunt Deb, even though she is, of course, nothing like her. My name is Christopher Wurst. I'm the host and producer of Soft Powerful Stories. Until next time.